Welcome to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. It's the show geared toward keeping you up to speed with the latest auto news, event coverage, and expert industry insight. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Avery and John Craman.
We're so glad you've joined us for another On the Move. I'm Matt Avery, executive producer of The Transmission. Joining me is John Craman, lead TV commentator for Mecum Auctions on NBCSN. John, it's hard to believe, but the 9 days of the Indy Spring Classic are already behind us.
Well, and as a direct result of that, Matt, we've decided to devote this entire episode to the sights and the sounds, we'll call them, of just the incredible Indianapolis auction. We do know a couple of things we can report right off the bat is that it was a all-time Spring Classic record. That's in 33 years, $74 million of sales reported. That's a 90% sell-through ratio, which is up about 11% over the 2019 record. How does that sound?
Well, it sounds like car enthusiasts were more than ready to get back to live events and get back to Mecum Auctions. For even more insight, we're going to have Frank Meekum on today's show talking about all of the work that went into the event, making it such a success.
Yep, and then we'll finish it up segment 3 with you and I both spent the entire time there with our own observations and trends as well as some of the auction results.
Before we get to all of it, John, let's get to some car news. There was a lot going on in the industry this week, starting with Porsche. They had a big announcement that they were pretty excited about.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're kind of shadowing with the results we have from Mecum Indy being a huge success. And they're reporting sales of the 3 most popular vehicles, the Cayenne, the Macan, the 2 SUVs, and the 911 are up from the same time over the period of 2019. So they were real proud about that. They issued a press release. This, of course, is for the world market. So that indicates that they must be on track with high-quality performance SUVs. And then, of course, the 911 too, reimagined and tweaked once again, getting real strong sales.
Well, that's great news for them, and it kind of makes sense and reflects the time that we're in where people are using this season of uncertainty to kind of reevaluate what they enjoy and what they enjoy doing. And for a lot of people, they're finding that they want to be spending the time behind the wheel of a vehicle that they enjoy, like a Porsche.
I think what's happening is, Matt, is a lot of people are changing priorities and changing directions on what's important to them. Cars purchased at a Mecum auction and cars like Porsche, those are aspiration vehicles. A lifelong of hard work can pay off by owning a vehicle of your dreams. And I think a lot of people are digging deep and they're going in a direction that's most important to them. Collector cars are a great way, and fun cars, performance new cars, are a great way to enjoy, the pandemic era without being at risk.
Well said, John. Let's turn our attention back to Bronco. I know we dedicated a lot of last week's show to it, having just seen the unveiling of it online, but now that the model's been out for a full week, people have had a time to digest it, to think about it, and one thing is clear: enthusiasm has not waned. There's a lot of excitement for that model.
Man, huge buzz. Still continues to be really number one out there in the news sources. Just to recap, 3 new specific models. There's a Bronco 2-door, Bronco 4-door, and then the slightly smaller Bronco Sport, more of a mild, sort of a crossover light off-roader. But what we do know since the reveal just a little over a week ago is that the advanced reservations, the pre-sale orders for the Bronco, are off the charts. They've got kind of a special launch edition. All the orders are sold out on that. So I think the Ford dealers are going to have a lot of fun over the next year or two getting the folks to come in, actually placing their orders for the options they want, getting those cars built, and getting those cars delivered. I think they hit the nail on the head, and it's already looks like it's off to a great start.
Now, if there was one point of contention, I have started to see some grumblings from the community who are complaining about the lack of the V8. That's something that you mentioned last week. Interesting to see if that will remain throughout the model's release, if people still want more power.
Well, our friends at Jeep have also continued in the past week to push information about a V8 powered Jeep. That's the Rubicon 392, 450 horsepower. And of course, their decision to start putting out that information the same time that the Bronco has been released certainly is not accidental. So what we're going to be able to look forward to from both manufacturers, Jeep and now Bronco, I think we're going to see a real battle. We're going to see a lot of competition between those two for not only for off-road prowess, which obviously is important to both of these brands, but just as importantly for that street cred, the image that these vehicles provide. And certainly a 450 horsepower Rubicon 392 Jeep is going to outdo the Bronco in the powertrain department for sure.
Now, speaking of high performance trucks and SUVs, SVE had some news to share this week. Now, we talked about them a couple weeks ago. We talked about their GMC Canyon based Cyclone truck program that is going to be offered with 750 horsepower. If that's not enough, they have you covered. They announced that for the 2021 model year, they also would be offering a Yenko SC Silverado. Now, SVE has the licensing to use that very iconic name, and they've been putting on specially prepared Camaros for a number of years now. Now you can get a truck version. So from a supercharged V8, it's claimed 800 horsepower, 720 pound-feet of torque. Has some of the looks of the iconic Yenko Camaros with the side stripe. It also gets some cool wheels and some other touches. And maybe the best part is it's available with a factory warranty.
Well, we do know that Ford and Ram are pushing the envelope in performance. We know that. And GM has been sort of left behind a little bit. So interesting that Yenko has decided there might be a market, although limited, as you say, 50 are planned to be built, to maybe kind of fill that void. Well, as a final thought, our friends at FCA have announced a merger and a name change. What do you hear about that?
Well, the latest is that FCA, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, will be merging with the Peugeot Group, a longtime European automaker. And the new name for the organization is Stellantis, which is Latin for to brighten with stars.
Yeah, interesting. I think we're probably going to see more information on that as we head towards the end of 2020 and into 2021. And you and I both were curious whether or not that the Peugeot brand, the Peugeot nameplate, so well known in Europe, will make its way here to the United States as a result of the merger. I'm going to go ahead and predict that probably not. I think that's going to remain a European brand primarily, but we'll find out more later this year.
And speaking of ramifications, John, it'll be interesting to see how much that new name actually shows up in visible places like in the dealerships, and I certainly don't envision it being on the cars. I think it'll be very close to how when Chrysler and Fiat merged a number of years ago to become FCA. I think same thing here, where for the most part, Stellantis will be behind the scenes.
Mecum Auctions is proud to bring you On the Move with Matt Avery and John Craman. For more on the world of collector cars, head over to Mecum.com. Now let's get back to the show.
We are so honored and pleased to have Frank Meekum, Consignment Director of Mecum Auctions, here with us, taking a little bit of time. Really anxious, Frank, to hear some of your observations and comments on the huge success of the Spring Classic. But before we get to that, what were some of the important factors that you had to deal with leading up to this auction with all the changes?
Well, there were so many different issues going on with the environment we are in today. With every day and every meeting that we went into, we had a change, and we would have to start over and start rebuilding, getting back to the point where we could have live auctions again. And it's just a testament to our team, the never getting down and never backing away, that the goal was to get here, and everybody was all in to the fact that we would get here and we could pull it off successfully no matter what they said, and proved it last weekend in Indy.
At what point in time did you realize that you were going to have to delay the auction and there were going to have to be major changes?
It was really right after our Glendale auction. Being in the middle of our Glendale auction, watching the world shut down around us, as we've all talked, by the time our Glendale auction was over, we were the last live event in the country. And in the 10 days following it, we knew that our spring schedule was going to be altered. And we've postponed, we've canceled, but the goal was always, no matter what, Indy was going to be the first live auction back. And after 2 moves and hundreds of changes and new precautions and new rules, we got there.
It's clear the Mecum team was ready to get back to action, but Frank, what about the guests and spectators that were on site? What was their overall feeling?
First off, to see everybody again last week was such an honor, and to everybody that was able to attend and everybody that participated from the Mecum company and the Mecum family, would just like to say thank you. Everybody was just great. There was a lot of inconveniences coming to the event. You had temperature checks coming in. You had different seating. Everybody wore their masks. There weren't the complaints about having to do all these different things. Everybody was there for the hobby and the greater of the good of the collector car world, and it showed.
We know now that the auction was an incredible success. What do you think some of the reasons were why this was a record event?
All the planning that went into it. We were able to institute new systems, our new live online auction format, giving the people that weren't just comfortable enough to attend the live auction or just couldn't be there, the opportunity to still be part of the action. And we showed with the record numbers of internet sales. We sold over 320 cars and $10.3 million over the internet, which is astounding numbers.
How does that compare with what you would have typically seen in a previous Mecum auction with internet sales?
There's no comparison. It is the amount of business we were doing online before was just minuscule. So to have this much action on the internet provided the opportunity for our sellers to have a successful event and provided the opportunity for Mecum to have a successful event.
Frank, it's probably clear that the overwhelming success of that online component was only fueled by that live experience going on in Indy.
Yes, the live action and having people in the room and having sellers there is still important, and we don't see that going away. But we are looking towards the future and know that the internet is going to be a huge part of our business, and this is just the first step of us growing into that online market and becoming a leader in the online world as well as the live world. And as we grow through this and we grow through COVID-19, we're going to walk out on the other side of this better for it.
Speaking of the future, Frank, how does the success of the Spring Classics set up Mecum for subsequent events as we move out into the calendar?
The success of Indy shows us that it is doable, and it is doable on a large scale, that we can safely put employees, we can safely put sellers, we can safely put buyers all in one room and complete an event without incident. And that is the most important thing out there. We can now go to these next events throughout the year and be confident that we're going to be able to do it right and do it safely and be able to continue the auction world.
The next auction coming up on the schedule is what is being referred to as a summer special, Kissimmee. That's August 27th through the 29th. Do you have any recommendations, anybody listening that might want to consider maybe consigning their car? What do you recommend that they do at this point to get on board?
Right now, the Kissimmee Summer Special has a great initial consignment being built. We still have availability to get in on it. We have some great cars already consigned, and we're looking forward to having a great new summer event. It's going to be hot in Florida in August, but we are looking forward to it.
Don't adjust that dial. On the Move, we'll be right back. Our program is proudly presented by Mecum Auctions, the world's largest collector car auctions. Now back to Matt and John.
Well, John, it was great to hear from Frank talking about his observations. And so what we want to do now is you and I both were on site for all 9 days of the Indy auction. We want to take some time and talk about our own observations and what we saw firsthand. Let's start by giving a recap of the top 10 sellers. We had some really, truly awesome cars cross the block. And it's kind of funny because the top 10 list is a battle of Ford versus Ferrari in a way, where we had 6 Fords and 3 Ferraris, and then we had a Rolls-Royce thrown in for good measure. So starting with number 1, little surprise here, the top seller of the Spring Classic was the 1965 Shelby GT350R prototype, sold for a world record $3.85 million, breaking the bullet record from this January's Kissimmee. So very important that Mecum has been able to sell 2 of the most historically significant Mustangs in the span of 6 months. Number 2, we have a 1965 Ferrari 275 GTS. It sold for $1.43 million. Number 3 was a 1966 Shelby GT350 convertible that sold for $1.1 million. Number 4, another 1964 Number 4 was a 1964 Shelby 289 Independent Competition Cobra that sold for $990,000. Number 5, 2018 Ford GT that sold for $946,000. Number 6, a 65 Shelby GT350 Paxton prototype that sold for $880,000. Number 7 was a 1966 Shelby GT350 Paxton Fastback that sold for $852,500. Number 8 is that Rolls-Royce. That was a 1963 Silver Cloud 3 Drophead Coupe that sold for $726,000. And number 9, 1971 Ferrari 360. Number 9, 1971 Ferrari 365 GTB4 Daytona. That sold for $715,000. And rounding out the top 10 was another Ferrari, this one a 2011 599 GTO, selling for $698,500. John, a really impressive lineup for top 10s for Spring Classic.
It is, and interesting that that top 10 seller contributes to the over $74 million generated in income, with the headline on the Mecum press release stating that Indy is a triumphant return to live auctions. And I think that's really important, Matt, because the whole entire collector car world has been watching and monitoring what was happening in advance of this Mecum auction. And now that we know that it has set another record after 33 years of the classic spring of the Spring Classic, anybody that was out there doubting that not only could Mecum execute a successful auction, but do it with bidders, sellers, and spectators. That's the key, being spectators. Now let me run down what some of the safety protocols were so people can understand what was going on. Temps checked. Every day when you walked in the building, you were assigned a wristband that let everybody know that you had had your temperatures checked. If you didn't have your own mask, masks were provided. There was hand sanitizer everywhere, literally everywhere you looked, there was hand sanitizer and plexiglass in strategic areas. And then the way that the cars were spaced and the way that the audience was spaced in front of the auction stage was all strategically placed to give everybody plenty of room. Hats off to the over 300 employees it took to run that auction, and also the over 100 employees back at the Mecum headquarters that worked for months in advance to make sure this thing went off without a hitch. We had over 30 hours of television coverage on NBCSN, a lot of positive comments from that as well. Obviously what it does is it sets the stage. It gives us a way now that we know we can take these auctions and we can execute them in the future. And as Frank had talked about during his segment, pretty refined. I mean, a few minor tweaks maybe going down the road, but the experience, the success of the tractor auction in June and the Vinoy auction also in June helped set the stage for this auction. And everybody, I can just say that everybody involved in this entire organization, very, very proud, very happy right now. Well, and we know we had a lot of familiar friends and faces at Mecum Indy, the Big Spring Classic. And I know you had a chance to catch up with a couple of them there, a couple of our former podcast guests. Who'd you have a chance to chat with?
Well, first, I connected with Gary Riley of Level 1 Restoration and got the latest from him about some of the restorations that he mentioned on the show, including the 1970 Humbler GTO and a 1967 Yenko Camaro. Both of those are on track, he said, to be unveiled as he discussed on the show at this fall's Muscle Car and Corvette National. So really looking forward to seeing how those turned out. Speaking of which, speaking of the Macan, I also connected with Bob Ashton, who is the event organizer, and he is full steam ahead, really putting together the finishing touches on that show. You and I both look forward to it. I can't wait to be there. So a lot of excitement for the fall, and both guys were excited to be back at a Mecum auction, and I'm sure we'll be seeing them again soon at a future event, even before Macaca, no doubt. Now, John, circling back to talk about Indy, let's get some of your overall impressions from your many years of going to a Mecum event. What are some of your takeaways from the 2020 Spring
I've got some
Classic?
observations that could be maybe put in the trends column of some really extraordinary energy and some really big sales. And I'm just going to kind of keep it very general. Of course, all of the data, sales data, can be easily accessed at Mecum.com. You can become a My Mecum member easily. It's very quick and free, and it gives you a lot of inside information. But I'm just going to let you know what I noticed there that seemed to be on an uptick. Broncos, vintage Broncos, were there in high quantity, and also in high quality, and bringing some extraordinary prices. Corvettes represented about 10% of the total inventory at the auction, so a couple of hundred Corvettes. We saw some great strength, Corvettes of all generations, including the very first sale of a Generation 8 Corvette, one of the all-new mid-engine 2020 Corvettes, had a sticker price of around $68,000, and it brought almost $30,000 over that. Very first one that we sold at a Mecum auction was Blade Silver, by the way. Mustangs, tying in with the Shelby theme, very, very strong. Vintage Mustangs coming all the way up to current generation Mustangs seem to have getting a lot of extra attention. Shelbys, of course, Ferraris, and the resto mods. It's just no end in sight, Matt, for not only the quantity, but just some fabulous resto mods bringing very strong money. And we've talked about it before in the show, and we'll continue to talk about it in the future, but I can safely say that resto mods have secured their place in the collector car world. Not only are they tolerated, but they're respected now, and they're sought after. And as more and more vintage cars get brought up to the level of a resto mod, which is loosely defined vintage car modern upgrades, we're going to be seeing more and more of them in the future. And a big part of what we can expect to see down the road in the collector car world is going to be generated by resto mods for sure.
Well, John, I want to leave you with my favorite experience from my time at the 2020 Spring Classic, and it involves last week's show guest, Michael Burris. As you know, Burris, as he likes to be called, is one of the professional drivers that Dodge uses for the Thrill Ride. The Thrill Ride is a free opportunity for guests at a Mecum auction to jump in with a professional driver in a Hellcat Charger or Challenger on a close course, really see those cars unleashed in an action. So after hearing Burris talk about how much fun he had behind the wheel, I wanted to see what it was all about, so I went out to the Thrill Ride, I tracked him down, and I jumped shotgun with him in a Charger Hellcat, and we went around the course, and it was just an awesome experience. Not only was it great to see the Hellcat Charger in action, but also to see Burris, and he is a very talented wheelman. We had a lot of fun screeching around the course, and I will say, John, it makes total sense why he made the comment on last week's show, why so many people would come back from that experience thinking that those cars are specially prepared or modified, and come to find out those are the exact same cars that you get from the showroom floor, just because of how capable they really are. Speaking of their capabilities, one of the other neat things was when we came back after the run, he showed me on the center screen the data that you can access. And one of the things is we didn't even access the full capability, the full limits of that Hellcat engine, the 707 horsepower. Burris showed me that we didn't even get into the 600 horsepower range. So for those leadfoots out there, it's interesting to know that there's a lot more capability capability than even what you see in the Dodge Thrill Ride. But I got to say, all in all, it was awesome, and I'll definitely be doing it again soon.
Well, it sounds like you had a lot of fun, Matt. I've got a terrible confession to make. I have never participated in a Dodge Thrill Ride, but all of that is going to change between August 27th and 29th at the Summer Special Kissimmee auction, which is our next auction. I am going to go on a thrill ride, and I will give you my report. Man, I can't wait for that to happen.
You've been listening to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. For more information, visit Mecum.com. And join us again next time as we take you inside the world of muscle and collector cars and more.